After 12 years of dedication, consistency, and carrying more responsibility than my job title ever reflected, my boss cut my salary, not because the company was struggling, not because my performance slipped, but because he wanted me gone, quietly, without severance, without confrontation, without paperwork that might raise questions. And I knew it the moment he slid the revised compensation letter across the desk with a rehearsed sigh and said, "We're making some tough decisions right now." Because companies don't slash the salary of the person who built their core systems unless they're hoping that person walks away on their own. I started at Westbridge Solutions straight out of grad school, grew with the company through mergers, product launches, layoffs, and leadership changes, and became the one constant clients trusted when everything else shifted, the guy who understood legacy code, vendor relationships, compliance quirks, and the unspoken workarounds that kept million-dollar contracts from collapsing. And for years, my loyalty was rewarded with praise instead of promotions, appreciation emails instead of raises, and promises that my time would come once things stabilized. They never did. Instead, I trained new managers who earned more than me, fixed mistakes made by executives who never acknowledged my role, and absorbed stress so leadership could sleep at night. Until a new VP arrived with a reputation for streamlining, which turned out to mean cutting experienced employees by squeezing them financially until they quit. My salary was cut by 25% overnight. No warning, no discussion, just a line item change justified as a realignment. And when I asked how this reflected my performance reviews, my boss avoided eye contact and said, "You're still valuable, but budgets don't care about feelings." Which was the moment I realized this wasn't about money, it was about pressure. They expected panic. They expected me to beg. They expected me to resign within weeks. What they didn't expect was patience. I didn't quit. I didn't lash out. I documented everything. Every email referencing my responsibilities, every request that contradicted my downgraded role, every instance where leadership leaned on me despite cutting my pay. And I stopped doing the invisible labor that had been propping the company up for years. I worked exactly to my updated job description, no more, no less, and the effect was immediate but subtle at first. Projects slowed, approvals stalled, clients asked why timelines were slipping, and suddenly managers were forced to confront processes they'd never bothered to understand because I had always been there to quietly fix them. The real shift came when one of our largest clients, a national logistics firm, escalated an issue that only I had historically handled. And when leadership scrambled to assign someone else, they realized no one knew the system well enough to even diagnose the problem, let alone solve it. And during a tense call, the client asked directly why I was no longer leading their account after 12 years, and instead of covering for management like I used to, I told the truth, professionally and calmly, explaining that my role had changed due to internal compensation restructuring. That sentence did more damage than any accusation ever could. The client went silent, then asked for a written explanation, then requested a full audit of staffing decisions affecting their contract. And within days, 2 other long-term clients followed suit after noticing the same drop in responsiveness and continuity. Leadership panicked, pulling me into meetings, asking for temporary support, hinting at future adjustments if I could help stabilize things. But I reminded them, politely, that my salary cut reflected a reduced scope of responsibility, and that any additional support would require formal renegotiation. HR suddenly found time on their calendars. Executives suddenly remembered my contributions. My boss, the same man who hoped I'd disappear quietly, tried to frame the salary cut as a misunderstanding, but by then the paper trail told a different story. And when the clients learned that the person responsible for their account stability had been financially penalized instead of retained, trust eroded fast. One client suspended payments pending review. Another shortened their renewal term. The third terminated outright, citing internal instability. And the revenue loss triggered an emergency board meeting that exposed the VP's cost-cutting strategy for what it really was: short-term optics at the expense of long-term value. By the time leadership offered to restore my salary and add a retention bonus, it wasn't enough, not because I wanted revenge, but because the damage was already done, and I had learned something critical during those months of silence. A company willing to weaponize your salary to push you out will do it again the moment it becomes convenient. I resigned on my terms, with another offer already signed, one that valued my experience instead of exploiting it. And within 6 months, Westbridge announced restructuring, client losses, and leadership turnover, while I moved into a role where my compensation reflected reality, not manipulation. Looking back, the most powerful moment wasn't when they cut my salary. It was when I realized that staying calm, documenting everything, and refusing to quit quietly forced the truth into the open. Because salary cuts aren't always about money. Sometimes they're about control. And when you refuse to be controlled, the entire system starts to crack.